The Matrix is one of my favorite movies. Like, I really feel like my journey has been one of, I've always tried to reach outside of myself, like this mentor, this book, this course, this tip, this teaching, and I always was let down. And so now I'm very passionate about showing others they can have it all, but that relationship with God is pivotal to all of it.
It's cornerstone, yeah.
And further than that, like just pursuing the fiat, just pursuing the money,
So good,
it's
man.
empty.
All right, guys, I have a very special guest in the studio today. I'm pumped about this show. We were just talking, like I feel like we were already having a podcast before we even started podcasting just a moment ago. But the individual that I have on today, I'll never forget when I met you. And so a mutual friend of ours invited me to go over to his house. They were having dinner, and we're driving out into these mountains, and it's absolutely beautiful. And we go to this home with this epic view. We go in, and I meet this guy. And he has the most incredible energy. It was in that moment, I was like, man, there's something on you. Like, there's something that you carry. It even drew me to you. I was like, there's something, like, some people have a presence that they carry in rooms, but yours wasn't loud and boisterous. Yours was silent and calm. And I was just like, man, this guy's got wisdom on him. And since then, just so you know, I've been following you. I've been watching you. I've been seeing, and I've seen you at church and different things. And I've just been so impressed. I believe that you have a good heart, that you're really good at what you do. And yeah, man, I'm excited to have you in this atmosphere. I don't think I've ever had a guest that carries what you have. And that's saying a lot, man. I've had 60 people sit in that seat. So I'm excited for today. But let me do the proper intro. I can talk a lot. I got J-Griff in the studio, Jeremy Griffin, and he is an online educator in the financial literacy space. And the guy's built multiple companies. He's helped so many people all around the world become financially free. Welcome to the show.
Oh, man. Really appreciate your kind words, brother. It's always nice to hear how other people think of you and what stands out when you first meet someone. So appreciate that reflection, and very excited to be here. And also, that's quite the compliment. You've had 60 different guests, and I hope that whatever comes through today, first off, it's not me. You can thank a higher power for that. And second off, I'm here to serve. So whatever's of the highest value to talk about today for the people, let's make that happen.
Come on. I love that. The heart of servitude, man. That's what we're going to do today. So we're going to serve you guys today. If you're listening to this, whether you're driving in your car, you're listening to it at home, I really want you to lean in to the words that are shared today. My hope for you is that you catch even 10% of what Jeremy shares with you today, because that is the epiphany and the revelation that brought this show to be, was if my friends back home could just catch 10% of the conversations I'm having, I believe their life will be made better because of it. And so I'm excited, man. So let's get into it. I always like to ask this because I feel like it shows a lot of the heart of the individual that's in the room. And I'm going to start with asking you, what do you value most in life?
Hands down, peace. I value peace more than money, more than impact, more than status. Peace is the gateway between the third dimension and what you could consider as the ethereal realms. It's almost like the door that connects us and God. And this is why my meditation practice, breath work, different introspective and reflective practices are so paramount to my lifestyle. Yes, I love business. I love achieving. I love, working out. I love being active. I love doing, but being is so fundamental to who I am beyond this meat suit, as I refer to it, who I am beyond my personality construct. We're all just an essence, an energy in nature. And I think it's really important to spend conscious, intentional time connecting with that essence. So at the end of the day, long before I, had money, long after, that soul essence is going to be there. You know what I mean? So I think it's very important to me to always ground myself, connect back into just peace, which is not doing anything, not thinking anything, just a being. That's really Like if you were to ask me like, Jeremy, what, I see you doing all these amazing things. You don't really need to work that hard for money. Like, why are you doing it? It's for peace. It's to have more peace. And at times in the short term, those two can be at odds, right? We were just talking before we started filming about sprints and, just putting in the work, grinding. Certain seasons require that of you.
Yeah.
But in general, the larger vision, I think some people are doing it, for status. Some people are doing it for impact. And I'm not going to lie and say those things don't matter to me. But my deepest driver is peace. Like to me, becoming wealthy means you can do what you want, when you want, with who you want, how you want. And that's powerful to me because I don't want to work all the time. I don't want to do things I don't want to do. I only want to invest to things that I believe in. And so that's where like peace ties into the wealth, the business, the service, the impact for me.
Yeah, that was good, man. That was powerful. Peace is something I think a lot of people want, but many times aren't actually going to create. Why do you think it is that we're so much caught in this hustle culture? And not just on the wealthy side, all the way down to the non-wealthy side.
Yep.
Hustling, living paycheck to paycheck. Not a lot of peace, very chaotic in life. I'm just curious, man, why do you think that is?
There's two things I can say. I think as a culture, we are misidentified with we derive our worth through achievement, whether that achievement is you're a minimum wage worker or you're an athlete or how your body looks, or if you're a girl, how attractive you are, how men want you or whatever, or you're a businessman. Are you at 7 figures? Oh, now you need to be at 8. Oh, now you need to be at 9. Oh, now you need to be a billionaire. Oh, you only have 1 billion. You need to have 10. I think there's this aspect that it's partly nature, partly nurture, in my opinion, right? We can't always blame they, if you will, right? The agendas and the culture that we live in. It's also kind of like that animal brain, that limbic brain it's always wanting more. It's how we evolved. It's why we have AI.
Right.
We can't stop. We literally can't stop ourselves. But that's the limbic brain. That's more of our animal drives. But then there's this notion of it doesn't help that has been studied, understood, and had, trillions at this point of dollars poured into it in terms of researching it and figuring out how to harness it and use it against us. So we also live in a culture now where it's constantly, we're being hit with that. We're being subconsciously told from the age of 6.
Is that because of capitalism? Is that because of the financial gain that companies make from that? Because of the more and more and more attitude?
I don't believe capitalism is the problem. I think if, regardless of which system we were in, I think this would occur. I think deeper than money and capitalism, even if we had a socialist or a communist or whatever, I think it's power. I think it's control.
People want more of that.
Yeah, like scared men try to control other people, right? And so in any system, you're going to have people try to rise to the top through any means necessary. And that's usually through more like Machiavellian approaches in nature, more around like power, control, manipulation, influence, and such. So yeah, I think, we've been told unconsciously, even from, as we were so young, we were just starting to watch Disney movies, and we're kind of being shown what gets validated, what doesn't,
right?
What earns love, what doesn't, what is worthy, what isn't, what a king looks like, what a princess looks like. We're learning these things before we can even speak or really think consciously, and our brain's just taking it in. You couple that with our already existing drives, and I think it's, it's very challenging. So to return to this concept of having a strong connection with the Creator, and deeper than that, deeper than just like, the typical, I go to church every Sunday, having those personal practices where this cannot just become something that's intellectual to you, but it can become something that's experiential to you. Do you know God? Have you experienced something outside of what I refer to as your I construct, your identity, the thing that's always thinking and that we often misidentify with? If you've never been able to see outside of that, or almost like third-party viewer observe that construct, that voice, the judge, right? Your ego. If you've never been able to break outside of that, then you actually think you're your thoughts. You actually think you're your preferences. You actually think you're your judgments, but you're not. That's just one construct inside of you that we could refer to as your personality or your ego, depending how we wanted to describe it. So to me, part of this journey of connecting with your creator and developing a deeper relationship is also a journey of elevating your consciousness, because a society that is stuck in a lower level of consciousness is going to live like an animal. But we're also the only species that has been gifted a prefrontal cortex and the ability to know that it's going to die. And so we have a unique opportunity to transcend our consciousness and not live like animals. We have a limbic brain, but we also have a prefrontal cortex and a neocortex and some of these other areas. So I think it's such a gift and such a unique, call it a game we're playing. You know, we're just born into this reality and we didn't consciously choose it. And you just wake up and you're just in the body that you're in and the family that you're in, and then you spend the rest of your life trying to make sense of it. So a lot of people live their lives as if they're victims. You know, they didn't choose this. They don't like their life and all that. But what's crazy is we create our realities, and all we have to do is take ownership over our own consciousness and start to understand that we can actually elevate our consciousness. And as we elevate that, we can start to kind of become less controllable. And that's the system's worst nightmare, right? Obviously, part of that is they want you to, I mean, there's so many agendas that we could go into. I'm not going to rabbit hole into those, but at the most macro, they want to disconnect us from the truth.
Right.
And the truth is that we are extensions of God. And that means that we are both achievement and embodiment. We both need to try and do and grow, and also are already whole and are already complete. And that's a paradox that the mind can't fathom, but the heart knows. So,
do you feel there's a spiritual warfare also going on?
Oh yeah.
Outside of the mental, the nurturing that you talked about, the nature that we have within our flesh, do you believe there's also a spiritual warfare competing for that?
100%. Yeah. And there's so many different directions that you could go with that. I mean, it's as simple as, for a lot of people, their awakening to this type of stuff starts with lately, the education system or the food system, right? Like for me, you know, you get into fitness and you're just trying to, you know, get jacked or look a certain way, right? It's very superficial. And then you start slowly caring more about nutrition. You start slowly caring more about what you put in your body, your water intake and supplements, and right, and cutting out things that are toxic. You start reading labels, and before you know it, you start looking at these labels and you're like, what? This is literal poison.
Yeah.
Why is this being marketed to 8-year-olds as the breakfast of, you know, champions if you want to grow up strong? And you start to ask just that one question. It's one of the most powerful words in the English language. Why? And you keep asking it. And it's usually a money trail, you know? So there's that aspect. And then you look at, okay, our drinking water. Why is there fluoride and antidepressants and birth control? Well, men aren't supposed to have high levels of estrogen, or they exhibit feminine characteristics. Look around society right now. We can't even agree on a gender. When you study the rise and fall of civilizations, it's always the young men, let's say age 18 to 30, that are the most important if you're going to go to war or if you're going to shift a system or create any sort of revolution. That's the one demographic that's being attacked, is it not?
Yeah.
Breaking up the family unit. Essentially, we're being told that there's something wrong with being masculine in today's culture. We need to be more feminine and dumb it down.
Very much under attack right now.
And so you start to look at it from all these lenses, like it's in our water, it's in our food, the family unit, media, And you start to get a pretty clear picture of like, well, why am I considered a conspiracy theorist if I'm just observing the world around me? And
it goes to that why. One question that just comes in my mind, because like I want to ask all the questions, right? Could it just be carelessness? Could it just be companies that wanted to profit, found out it was cheap to make cereal, put seed oils, a bunch of crap in it,
right.
market it because they know people would buy it. The byproduct is terrible for the human body, all these things, but they don't care because they just want to profit. Could it just be multiple scenarios of carelessness? Or do you feel that there's a true agenda behind that? Or maybe the carelessness led to people going, you know what, that kind of aligns with what we want to do anyway, so let's keep doing it.
Yeah.
I'm just conversating about it, you know?
Yeah, it's a good question. And to clarify, I'm never one who's like, how dare you? This is how we actually stress test ideas and think things through, right? We don't want to live in echo chambers.
Right.
Absolutely.
I actually agree with everything you're saying. I just also want to bring to the conversation of the mastermind principle of, could it be carelessness? Is there agenda being pushed? All of that. Because I think the audience listening, there's such a persuasion that can also happen through this conversation. I want their brain to ask why about a bunch of different stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to have both sides. There's nothing worse than listening to a podcast and it's just two people who think the same things and all they do is just kind of sit on those ideas. There's no sort of back and forth. Yeah, so I appreciate that. So my thought on this is absolutely it can and definitely is that. I'm not a fan of black and white thinking, and in my space and in the more, let's say, the online spirituality space, or you start to learn about these rabbit holes or the alternative health space or the financial literacy space, it's very popular right now to talk about the matrix and the powers that be, and they're doing this and they're doing that, and it's always under a very black and white mindset, right? Because it's very easy to influence people and to appeal to that limbic brain, to that fear response. If you just go, it's all over, it's ending this Friday, or, you know, whatever, they're coming for you. It's just very, it grabs you. It's very emotional. It's very polarizing.
People love absolutes.
Yeah. But it's also one of the things that bothers me like the most about the space is just like, I guess that's just human nature. It's not going to go away, but it's something that definitely frustrates me. So as far as like how I actually think through this stuff, absolutely. I think there's just a lot of, so I'm a fan of the first principle of incentives. Incentives drive outcomes, right? So we were talking a little bit before this about real estate and such, and you were talking to me about different tax write-offs with cars and all that, right? So how does the government drive their desired behaviors? Tax code.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple.
Incentivize us to do what they want us to do.
Yes, exactly. So for another example, if they wanted to incentivize a better education system, they would probably pay teachers more, right? It's not very incentivized, is it? Or
not at all.
How about policemen?
Right.
Not very incentivized, is it? So incentives run the world. And this is the issue we run into with the political system, is we complain about Nancy Pelosi and all the call options and all the stocks she's buying. She's worth, let's say, 200 million, and she's never made more than 200,000 in a year. The math ain't mathin'. But we get mad at that. We want to rah, break into her house, attack her husband or whatever, if you heard about that. We want to like isolate the specific scapegoat. But it's like, wait, hold on. The system incentivizes that behavior because they don't do anything about it, do they? They're incentivized. That's just human nature. You put that person in that position, they're pretty likely to slip up.
Their human nature is taking over.
Yeah. And so that's just a little bit more context about how I think through these things. But as far as the conversation of like, putting seed oils in our food and poisoning us, like, is it really this malicious? He's like, ha ha ha. And someone's sitting behind the, up in their suite, 100 stories up, and they're doing little mixtures of how to poison everyone. No, I don't necessarily think that that's happening at scale. I think that a lot of it is just greed. A lot of it is just laziness. A lot of it is optimizing for margins over health, impact, whatever. So definitely. But that's where we get into a little slippery slope, because then people hear this and they go, exactly, that's why capitalism's bad. And they blame capitalism. But long before...
But it's not capitalism.
But long before capitalism, men were flawed. Read history.
Yeah.
We were fucking animals. Sorry if you need to cut that. We were animals, hundreds of years ago. Very uncivilized. So it's not an issue of a system. It's an issue of man's nature. And this is why you had, stoicism. This is why you've had religion all throughout history, because all spiritual benefits aside, a society has to believe in certain morals, certain principles.
We need a moral code,
or it will fall apart.
We'll fall apart. Complete chaos will ensue us as a civilization.
Yeah. So to kind of come full circle with your question, yes, definitely just greed, laziness. I would say I like to fall on, Pareto's principle. Maybe 80% of it is that. Maybe we're just thinking too much into it. But then there's this 20% where, for whatever reason, and I don't want to ever speak as if I know this for a fact, because a lot of these things are similar to your relationship with a higher power. It involves a degree of faith. Are we ever going to know something that we weren't personally in the room when these discussions happened, right? Like you start talking about the creation of the Federal Reserve, the Bilderberg Group. I don't know if you're familiar with any of these types of things, but you start going over, some of how Rockefeller took over the education system. You start going over the Flexner Report, how he took over the medical system and Standard Oil and all these things. And it's like we can read books on them. We can hear, accounts on what happened. But at the end of the day, we weren't actually there. And so to some degree, you will never know. And I think a lot of people who are in my space who go into a lot of rabbit holes, they're just so lost in like things that don't really matter that much. And I don't say that to say that it doesn't matter to be aware of these things and know these things. I probably know more about them than most anyone I've met. But it's to say that like people get into this just like these mental loops of like focusing on things outside of them. And at the end of the day, all that does is give away your personal power. So when you ask that question, I think a lot of people who do what I do would maybe even get defensive and be like, yes, absolutely, there's an agenda. There's they're doing this and that, and I can prove it, and let me show you. And it's like, sure, I could do that, but also like I'm quite practical. I also understand that humans are just humans, and so I don't think everything is malicious. I think, like, for example, Disney. I don't know if you were watching that whole thing with Bob Iger, their CEO, but they started to go super woke.
Oh,
super woke.
Yeah.
They started to be changing genders and doing weird things in their cartoons, and they forgot their target market. They forgot who built that company, right? When you're in business, you're in the business of serving your customers. They forgot that the customers are not the kids. It's the parents that buy it, right? It's the parents that buy their kids Disney books and Disney merch and take them to Disneyland. It's the parents you're marketing to. Do you think parents want their kids taught that there's 73 genders and pronouns? It backfired.
Yep.
And so in that situation, is Bob Iger, part of the Illuminati? Is he hanging out with Klaus Schwab behind closed doors? I don't know. But to me, that's just a simple mismanaged business decision. It could have been as simple as he thought, like they genuinely thought, well, we've hit that tipping point in the culture. This is going to be accepted now. Let's triple down on it and be innovative.
Right.
Let's be the first ones to come out with a, Pinocchio, but it's a Caesar's eye or something, right? I could easily see how that could have played out. They tested it, right? Because in business, it's like the market will let you know, right? You can have the best idea in the world, but the market will let you know real quick.
Consumerism is going to drive ultimately the behavior.
So they tested it, they put it out, and it almost, the stock is down over 50%, and most stocks that were booming during the last money printing season are near or at all-time highs right now. So Disney they've taken a serious hit to their market share and such, and so you can go down these conspiracies of, Walt Disney and his relationship to the deep state and all these different things. But it's like at the end of the day, I also just think that incentives drive behavior. And in the capitalistic system, the number one incentive is money and profits. And so it shouldn't be too far of a stretch to understand that people are going to approach that in a malicious way.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm such a proponent of what I refer to as conscious capitalism. It's essentially not approaching business as, how can I make the most money right now, but from a place of like, what is the most aligned? Like, why did God put me on this earth, and how do I combine that with a profitable business model? And that's what I'm all about. Like, there's a ton of businesses I could start right now. just because they're making money right now, right? Just looking at different opportunities, different arbitrage things, different trends. But that doesn't interest me because that's not why I'm here. Then money's just a means to an end.
Yeah.
And so once again, incentives. Imagine if we created a system where you were incentivized to figure out like what your unique gift is.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so much solely about, profit margins and quarterly earnings and everything like that.
Yeah.
And that's not a blow at capitalism. I'm an investor. I enjoy all these things. I'm an entrepreneur, but I do think that incentives is a big part of this conversation, especially we get
and
into
this
politics.
is some thought-provoking stuff. And I really am enjoying this conversation. I hope you guys are too, because it's nice to have things that invoke thought and make you think about things and make you ask why. I've been on this trend lately where that exact paradigm of asking why has been, you talked about going inward. So when we get out of doing right and we go inward, I actually think we're finally able to think for ourselves. And it's in that place that and going back to the beginning of this show, right? Like I asked you, what do you value most? And you said peace, and you went into peace. And I also began having this wheel spinning in me of, wow, the way God designed it is we have to have prayer and meditation. We have to have quiet time, because it's only in the not doing, in the peaceful moment, that we actually get clarity, right? Because when you're doing, there's such an influence going on in the subconscious and conscious mind. But when you pause, that's no longer influencing it. So now the mind gets to think through things. So with that being said, I've began to ask a lot more why. All the way down to there was this family, and it was Thanksgiving dinner, and the wife always propped up the turkey with the vegetables or something like that. And now some people can say that's food thing, but this is a crazy story and it's a true story. And the husband goes, why do you always do that? They have things we can buy that lift the turkey, out of it. And she's just no, that's the way my mom's always done it. That's the family recipe. And so then her mom came over and they asked her, why do you do that? And she's like, whoa, because my mom always did it. Right? So they call great grandma or whatever, she's still alive, on the phone. And they say, hey, we're just curious. We're talking about it. Why do you prop up the turkey every Thanksgiving with vegetables? And she's like, oh, that year I just forgot the thing at the store. So I just used the vegetables to prop it up. Right? And it was this paradigm of they'd always done it because that's the way they saw it modeled, the way they were told to do it. But the truth of it was she just forgot. So she just figured out a way to do it that Thanksgiving. And then her daughter saw her do it that way. So it created a belief system that carried on for generations. And I began to think about that. I'm like, how many beliefs have I adopted just because that I don't actually know why I believe it? And that created this crazy space of, in the pause, I just began to think. I mean, think about different things in my life, and why do I believe that? Why do I say that? Why do I respond that way? Do I actually believe that? Let me go learn more about this thing. And I would come out of these moments and I'd start doing research, and I'd start reading my own books and looking at my own stuff, whatever I could find, and thinking about it and talking with God about it. And I began to realize there were certain things I believe and certain behaviors I have that were just imprinted on me, that weren't even mine. So I'm curious. I want to pause here and hear some of your thoughts on this.
What you're touching on is extremely powerful self-inquiry. And it's such a foundational skill. Part of my why in what I do, which I'm sure we'll eventually talk about in the community that I run, I've really built it to be an alternative to the schooling system, to the education system. Because in my opinion, the education system failed me. And so instead of complaining about it or being a victim, I did something about it, right? That's entrepreneurship for you. So I solved the problem.
Yep.
And one of the things that we teach as foundational when you come in, as a matter of fact, you can't even get to the rest of the curriculum until you go through this entire, let's call it an entire section. You could even think of it as a semester if we were using, college terminology.
Right.
It's all about inner work and going internally, being able to become aware of your beliefs, shadow work, inner child work, revisiting your past, trauma, all these types of things And I've had it reflected back over and over and over and over. People are like, wow, like, we thought we were joining for, financial freedom or whatever, right? It's like the typical marketing phrase, speak to what they want, but give them what they need. It's 101 what I do. And so it sometimes catches people off guard, but it's like, regardless of what you want to do in life, like whether you want a fulfilling marriage, or you want to have extremely fulfilling friendships and relationships, or you want to be able to be of service to other people in the world, or you want to build $1 billion enterprise, or you want to be the best athlete that you can be, or you want to have be in the best shape and the best health and vitality that you could be. Like, name any bucket that gives life its meaning. Everything starts internally, because before something can manifest in the external world, it has to start as an intention. And that could be a belief, that could be an emotional state, that could be a thought. It depends on the trigger.
Right.
But the metaphysical precedes the physical. It has to have that, let's call it a belief or a thought or whatever, that creates that initial electrical signal in your body that then communicates with, let's just call it the ether, God, however you want to think of it. And then that is actually what creates the world of form. And that's why you have Genesis 1:1, basically speaking to that notion.
Right.
It's not just about God. It's also letting you know how things work in this dimension. Things have to be spoken, and then there was, right? So it's a very interesting concept when you start to practice self-inquiry. And it doesn't have to be all woo-woo, right? Like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and the Stoics were doing this thousands of years ago. Just analyzing the mind, questioning its assumptions, starting to ask just that simple question of why. And then you get a response, don't you? And then you ask why to that, and then you get a response to that. And you ask why again, and you get down to the root. And it's almost always going to be an answer of some sort of, the root answer is always going to be an emotion. It's either going to be some sort of negative emotion that you're trying to avoid, or it's going to be some sort of need you're trying to get met. Maybe you didn't ever, feel safe during childhood. You grew up in a kind of chaotic household. You didn't often have emotional safety. And now you're an adult and you're doing these things, and it just looks like, oh yeah, this is just my personality, right? My favorite phrase, like, that's just who I am. It's just how I am. It's just how I am. It's the opposite of a growth mindset. It's just how I am. And we often hear this in relationships, right? Like, this is just me.
Yeah.
You love me or not, but this is me. And it's like, no, that's trauma. That's a coping mechanism to some shit you went through during your upbringing. And you developed that unique strategy to try to get your needs met because it worked for you during your childhood. But then we become adults. We're not children anymore. And we start trying to interface with the world. We start trying to have actual relationships. We start trying to meet our husband or our wife, and we run into problems, don't we? Where this pattern that always worked for us, it ain't working so well anymore. It's actually hurting those that we love.
Yep.
Or it's hurting ourselves. Talk about self-sabotage and self-deprecating behavior, right? Addictions, things where it's like we're writing down our goals. We're saying we're going to do this, and then once again, we do this instead. We're like, why did I do that?
Yeah. Or
like, oh, I just need more discipline. Let's start listening to David Goggins. Start listening to motivational speeches, right? More Les Brown, that'll fix it. Nah, it's deeper than that. It's internally, right? And so it's beautiful that you're, going deeper into these self-inquiry, because it's really like, I view all this stuff as like a thread. It's a thread, and you start pulling on it, and it just keeps coming, and you just keep pulling on it. So the more you just keep asking why, the more you're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And in my own self-inquiry, this is kind of a trip to ponder on. In my own self-inquiry, I have found that almost every single behavior in our species comes from the unconscious fear that we have of death. We're the only species that is consciously aware we're going to die. Think about that.
Yeah.
How much of this notion of, like, think about this. Why did we build AI? How did we go from like banging sticks together for fire
to an artificial intelligence
to a sentient alien technology? How did we bridge that gap? To me, there's a very compelling argument for the fact that what drives us, totally unconsciously, of course, it's not like we're thinking about this,
Right.
but unconsciously, why do we have to build? Why can't we stop ourselves? Even to the point where we now, in the next few decades, could easily build the technology that could end our civilization, right? There's now that responsibility there.
We did with nuclear bombs
And yet we can't stop ourselves, can we? Why? I think there's a lot of unconscious angst around, like, we're going to die, and our ego, our I construct, it can't possibly like process that or make sense of that. And so it's almost like when someone's nervous and they just fidget, they just have to do something. They just have to distract. I feel like if you look at civilization as a whole, I'm talking the global human race, I feel like a lot of what humans do, a lot of what we've built, amazing things, right? Architecture and civilizations and societies and innovation and technology. I feel like a lot of it has come from, it's either that or we have to sit with the reality that we're all just hanging out, waiting for our time card to get punched. And I think that that's maybe kind of grim for a lot of people. It doesn't happen to be grim for me. I feel like death is rebirth, or
but
just
even through faith, though, right? Like Christianity, I'm a Christian. We get to a place where we find a peace in knowing where we're going when we do die.
Yeah.
Right. So there's almost through that faith that there is not as much fear around it. Like I have such a peace now that if I left here today and God forbid a car hit me and I was gone, that I know where I'm going. I believe that. So there's almost this peace through the way I live my life, which creates also a moral code in order for me to get to that place, which helps me operate while I'm on this earth. But I know my biology at an unconscious level is designed to keep me alive, right? So on an unconscious depth level, if you put a button in front of me that said, if you push this button, you'll live another 100 years. And if you push this button, but there's risks with it, and you won't, the unconscious mind's always going to want to push that another 100 years. Right? Because it's the biology in me is like, well, we have to survive. So it's like, how do you, because you have this conscious mind and this unconscious mind, and the unconscious and the biology and the human in me, that animal side of me wants to just live. That conscious in me actually wants to ascend to the next place.
Welcome to the human experience. And that's why it's such a trip to be human. And you look at, back to incentives, what are some of the biggest industries in the world? Makeup, fashion, and then you look at technology and this whole notion of transhumanism, trying to live longer, the medical industry, trying to keep people alive. Almost all of our industries are somehow related to this notion of staying young longer. So you start to look at how much money is spent GDP-wise globally per year on trying to live longer. It's pretty apparent to me, like, most of us are just living with this deep unconscious angst that we're going to die. And that's why, once again, it's so important. And throughout history, it's been so important, especially when life was way harder and lifespans were way shorter before modern medicine and such. It's so important to have something to live for, right? A connection to something greater than you. So religion has been so important throughout history as well. Like all benefits spiritually between you and your creator, all benefits aside, as a system, it's been very, very important. And so that's another thing where I often speak on in my content, this notion of the fourth turning, which is like this demographic trend that charts the rise and fall of civilizations, because that's very important in the investing that I do. There's this notion of one of the number one signs that you're in a fourth turning is like peak polarization. The left and the right can't agree, and usually like the degrading of morals and values in a society. Check, check, check. So it's an interesting time. And that also speaks to kind of the war on God, if you will, right? We used to pledge allegiance to the flag, one nation under God. We used to kind of pray as a nation. We used to have presidents openly, reference God. And now it's become a thing of a little bit taboo. And so it's very interesting when you start to put all these little pieces together of we're in a very unique time period. And I believe that people like you and me are here during this time period, not at all as a as a coincidence.
Yeah. So good, man. I love that. And we definitely went down the rabbit hole there, but I really enjoyed it. I would love for people to learn a little bit more about you and what you do. Because you built something pretty cool, and it's interesting, like having, I've interviewed several hundred entrepreneurs probably in the last 5 years. I just have another show too. And, you have all these people that you get to talk to, and you get to ask them all these questions and get to know them and learn from them. And I'm actually probably the greatest benefactor of these shows because I get to learn so much from you guys. And I started to notice this common theme of everyone that sits in that chair has some kind of mission. They believe in themselves so much, and they believe in what they're doing so much that they actually go out and do it. And that was a commonality a conclusion I've drawn, a very simple one. I know you believe in yourself, and I know you believe in what you're doing, or you never would have achieved what you've achieved. Will you share with the audience what that is?
Yeah, it's a great question. My mission at the most macro is to help people actualize complete freedom in their lives. I phrase it as complete freedom because if you look at, my social media, if you look at my content, a lot of it seems like I'm talking a lot about money and wealth. We have a wealth brand. That's a lot of what it is. But our podcast and another one of our brands that we're building is called Conscious Wealth. And this notion of conscious wealth is really at the heart of my mission. And the way I always explain it is, if you only have money, you're not wealthy, right? Me and you both know that. Life is so much more than just fiat that doesn't even have value.
Real value.
If we want to go into all that. Fiat debt notes. There are different buckets, as I usually refer to them, that give life their meaning. And so I think that's probably what's unique about me, my mission, and the way that I go about building our companies and such, and even the brand and our the media side with the free content and everything, the podcast, is, you tune into a typical wealth brand or a wealth podcast, and you're going to learn about, Roth IRAs, and you're going to learn about budgeting, and you might learn about IULs and life insurance, and maybe you'll learn about crypto, and you might learn about bonds and interest rates, and start learning about macroeconomics, and okay, all that, cool. We teach that as well. But what these finance guys don't understand is that most of them are sacrificing the best 40 years of their life, their health, their relationships. Their kids don't speak highly of them. They've been divorced multiple times. They don't have time freedom.
Right.
For 5 to 10 million when they retire. Is that worth it? Are you wealthy? Would you do that again? And so my whole notion is like, we can have it all. And so that's why, up until now, we haven't even really gotten into what I do, right? We're talking about like the subconscious mind. We're talking about trauma.
Which I really enjoy.
Which is great. Yeah. That's what I love to talk about because that's what dictates everything else, right? It's starting first with the relationship to the creator because all of this is rented anyway. And then it's okay internally going there. And then everything comes through that. And so, yes, we talk about money and investing and, disruptive innovation is one of the areas that we're big in, and AI and cryptocurrency, and really like, investing for what the world's going to look like in 10 years is kind of like our forte. But helping people build wealth and then protect their wealth, those are the two areas we really focus on, is building generational wealth and then asset protection. Those things are more like surface level, like when I talked about speak to people's wants, give to their needs. So people might find me and be like, oh, I want to hire them based on that, right? Like he knows about trusts and he understands contract law and he knows how to invest and blah, blah, blah. Cool. But what people actually get and what we're all actually searching for, which we've already discussed, but to kind of reiterate, whether you know it or not, what we're all actually searching for is peace. Yep. We're searching for self-love. We're searching for connection. We're searching for community. We're searching for fulfillment. We want to look in the mirror and not only love what we see and love how we feel about ourselves, but love the people we have to or choose to spend time with, and love the activities that we choose to or have to engage in on a daily basis. And that is actually when you're going to feel what you think money will make you feel. And for a lot of people, they have to get there to realize that, right? It's the typical story of, the rapper or the actor or the businessman or the rock star, gaining everything just to realize like, this is it. And they're all depressed and they jump out of a building or they quit and they just go rogue and you don't hear from them again, right? Whatever it is. Those stories impacted me a lot growing up. I saw quite a few of those stories and I was like, this is interesting. And so I really I don't even know if strove is a word. I really tried to, on my journey, as a capitalist, entrepreneur, investor, I tried to not be one of those stories where like first they have to become like massively wealthy at the expense of everything else and then they'll live their life. Like then I'll stop being, rude to everyone around me. Then I'll start prioritizing my health. Then I'll work on building solid relationships. Then I'll see what this whole faith, spirituality thing's about. Then I'll consider looking at my upbringing and addressing my trauma and all that. I've done so all together in a holistic fashion along my journey. And so with back to my mission and my why and everything, it is really trying to instill that in others and letting people know that like money is amazing and you need money because money is really just resources and opportunity, right? Yeah. It's being able to create what you desire to see more of in the world. It's being able to say no to things that don't align with you and your values. It's not having another man decide if your family eats. That's important. So it's very important, right? There's this whole spiritual camp that's like, see, this is why I denounce money. It's the root of all evil. No, it's not. Money is very important. And the church that we go to that's part of why I like it so much. They own that. Right. And I was raised in a Christian environment where it was a lot of shame and guilt around money. You're always playing small energy. So that's an important piece of it. But the other piece of it is like, but your health matters. And the way you show up for your husband or wife or your partner matters. And the way in which you treat your kids and how present you are with them and how conscious you parent them and how much love and emotional connection you're able to provide them. That's important. And your free time and your other passion projects and your creativity and your peace, these things are all important. So really, I think I'm just on a mission to teach people. I don't so much believe in the word balance, but more so this notion of instead of but, which is always what we've been sold, but like in other words, that there's trade-offs. Like everyone, I'm yet to meet a person who hasn't told me they would love to be a multi-millionaire, right? If I would just had a briefcase of cash right now, most people are going to accept that. But the reason a lot of people don't ever actualize that is because they deep down unconsciously believe that they would either have to be a bad person to have that, or that they would have to sacrifice the things that they actually care about and actually love to have that. And so my whole mission is helping amazing, moral, value-based, conscious humans build wealth. And along the way, understanding that all of these areas should be prioritized. It's not a but, it's an and. You can be this and have all of this. Yeah. And so that's where it's like comes back to why we run a brand, not a specific company, and why I don't sit on here and talk about a specific company or an offering. It's a brand because really we're trying to portray a lifestyle, and I embody the lifestyle that I teach. So it's not so much of, here's our business offering, here's how it works, here's what it can do for you, and much more so of a thing of showing people what's possible. And that's why we do what we do with the content and with our teachings and everything like that, so people can understand like, whoa, this guy's very financially well off. He's also very grounded. He also seems to be quite fit. He also seems to really prioritize his relationships. He also treats everyone he meets with respect. And he also has very strong integrity. And I don't know about you, but I grew up watching movies where the rich guy was always the villain.
Yeah.
He was always the one who was greedy. He was always the one who was cheating on his wife. He was always the one who died. It was always portrayed like that, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like how the dad is portrayed now in movies. They've kind of done that. We don't understand how much that affects us until we go
nurturing.
Until we go on this journey to try to become wealthy, and we keep like hitting roadblock after roadblock after roadblock and self-sabotage. We're like, what's going on? And then back to that why? I've done so many years of introspection, especially in my earlier 20s, from 20 to 25, before I ever started to have money come in, right? Because first I had to really believe that was possible and that I was worthy of that. And one of the core things that I came to is that I believed that if I were wealthy, that I wouldn't belong anymore, that I wouldn't fit in, that I would be excommunicated from the tribe, because I grew up being told by my parents that wealthy people were greedy, and that if you had extra money, you're selfish, and that if you even desired to have extra money, just think about this concept. It's ludicrous now, but if you even desired to have extra money, abundance, you were greedy, you were selfish, and you weren't spiritual. So I had these two belief systems at total odds. On the one hand, I always looked up to Kobe Bryant and Derek Jeter and athletes, and they inspired me, not just because of their excellence, but also because they created this massively abundant life. They became the top 0.1% in a craft or whatever it may be.
Right.
And they got to experience a level of life that most of us can't fathom. But on the other hand, I'm raised in the church, and I have these beliefs of shame and guilt, and that I would be selfish, and that now it's like, okay, so my parents wouldn't accept me. They wouldn't love me. The church wouldn't accept me, wouldn't love me. My friends and peers wouldn't accept me, wouldn't love me. And this is like an unconscious battleground going on. And what I've noticed since I've started putting out wealth content the last few years very heavily is just how many other people had this same experience and have these same root beliefs. At the end of the day, we are tribal animals. We evolved in tribes. We evolved in small communities. We don't survive or thrive by ourselves. We are collaborative organisms.
Relationships.
Yes.
It's the way we were designed.
And so if you think about having your money beliefs all tied into your relationship, your desire to belong, which one of those is going to beat out the other?
Relationship.
If they're at odds, it's going to be fitting in, belonging, because that is directly tied to you surviving. You know, go back a few thousand years. If you get excommunicated from the tribe, you're going to die. You're not going to survive.
And it becomes one or the other.
Yes.
It becomes this black and white belief, right? And I was reminded that scripture, what is it for a man to gain the world and lose his soul?
Yep.
Right? And it was like, then you have people who get hurt in relationships. So they, well, screw everybody.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you.
Right.
And they just chase wealth at the cost of sabotaging everything else that has value in their life. They do what you said. They get the 5, 10, 20, whatever, millions, the house, the car, the fame, all that. And then they find themselves the most lonely they've ever been in their life, addicted to drugs at an all-time low. I thought this would make me happy. And they actually become power hungry. I need more. I need more. Maybe I just don't have enough. I need more. I need more. And it's just this ruthless cycle. Dude, I definitely can see that, man. And so you're on a mission to show people it's not but, it's and.
100%. Yep. And so, you know, with our podcasts and our free content and everything, I think one of the things that's unique about it is like...
What's your podcast so they know?
The Conscious Wealth Podcast. And you'll find that on the official J-Griff YouTube. So one of the things that's interesting is like in the online space, you always hear this, like you got to niche down, choose a niche, right? Get super granular, choose a niche. Well, when you start actually going brand, it's totally different. The rules change, right? Whereas, you know, you look at someone like a Joe Rogan.
You're speaking my language right
Every single episode, like he's going to have on that his comedian friend Dustin Truesdell or whatever it's called, and they'll literally dress up as like astronauts or ghillie suits, like they're totally just messing around, and then the next time he'll have an astrophysicist on. Like there is no niche. It's the biggest podcast in the world.
Yep.
But then you have, if you're more so focused on like in the early days of building a business or building an offering or getting, cash flow revenue up, of course you need to niche down and you need to have a specific ideal client and you need to nail the specific offer and all of that. So the rules are a little nuanced there. But I say all that to say that what is unique about us with the Conscious Wealth podcast and with everything we put out for the brand relating to wealth and lifestyle is there is no niche. We're focusing on painting a picture, a lifestyle, a way of living, a way of being. And so it's important to show, the nice car, the dinner, but it's also important to show how much of a priority my inner practices are. And it's also important to show that I wouldn't have any of this if it weren't for God. And that always comes first. And it's also important to show my amazing relationship with Jax, my partner. And so there's all these different aspects. And I think that's really the newer mission. Brand wasn't so much of a focus, a year ago, 2 years ago. It was more so building to that point of terminal velocity.
Yeah.
And we've kind of hit that point. And so now, the next 5-10 years is about brand. And a lot of that we're doing through, visual storytelling and, all about that. So just, video content.
Dude, I love that though, man. When I got into business, I'm all like, even this podcast, right? There's no niche in this podcast. Yeah. The brand is Cody Cottle. Yep. The brand is J-Griff.
Exactly.
And it was because I didn't want to be pigeonholed. Because even when I got into business and I joined masterminds, people that I look up to, great mentors and coaches in my life, and I have the most respect for them. But they would always hit me with, you have to niche.
Me too.
And I'd be like, but that's not me.
Yeah.
Like what you're telling me to do and be might have worked for you and others to make money, but that's not what I feel in my heart. So I just started posting videos. I was like, screw this niche stuff. I'm just going to serve people and speak my heart and speak my truth. And God, if I never make any money doing any of this, I'm okay with that. If I got to go back and get a job, but I still get to post videos and be what I feel called to be and do what I feel called to do, I'm willing to do that. And it's so cool to hear you say that and how you broke down brand. You have no idea, because we talk all the business strategy and stuff, and I've built subcategories of companies under my brand that sure are niched, right? Like we have a client acquisition system with AI, very niche to getting customers. I have a content company that's very niche to short form content because I figured out business practices. But the only reason either of those things thrive is because I'm just myself, putting myself out here every single day on a mission, on a conquest that people align with my values. And that's what fills those. And I kind of see that with you. So I just wanted to say that's really cool, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that, brother. Yeah, it comes back to like, well, first off, I've dealt with that like repeatedly with mentors and such, where it's like, technically they're here, you're here, you hired them for a reason. So it's like, they're like, are you not going to take my advice type thing? But it's like, what I've had to learn along the way is when God bestows a mission on you that is so specific to why you're on earth, you can't really, the rules are just different. You can't plug and play strategies that might work for everyone else, but in my experience along my journey, time and time again, mentors doing 5, 10, 50 times what I'm doing at the time are like, we know what we're talking about, just do it. And it hasn't worked for me. It just doesn't work. And I've come to the realization that that's because I was put here to pave my own path. And I definitely, see that same attribute in you. And I think it comes down to, how do you see the world? It's not like a wrong or a right? Obviously they're doing well. But it's more of like, how do you define success? There's this assumption in business that success equals the most money possible. In other words, that success would be quantified as leaving the least amount of money possible on the table. But that's not how I define success.
Right.
I actually pass up a ridiculous amount of money because I believe in goodwill. I believe in integrity. I believe in, I mean, for example, we turn away about 70% of applicants that we get for the community. I mean, that's an easy 2 to 3x to our business right there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so important to define what does success look like for you. And once you do
and not
that,
based off this podcast,
right,
listening to me and you, not
no,
based off the book you read, not based off the Instagram reel, actually going inwards.
Yep.
Like we talked about. And guys, figure out what success actually means for you. And when you identify that in your heart, no one can take that away from you. And I think that hits it so amazing. I turned down tons of money just like you because I could care less. Like success to me is not the dollars in my bank account at all. Success to me is actually using the gifts God gave me and giving them away to the world through servitude. So for me, my quantification of success when I go to bed tonight, did I give my gifts away to the world? Did I make some kind of positive impact through them, no matter how big or how small? I'm successful in my mind if I do that. I do not care what people pay me. I do not care what the bottom line is. I do not care about the P&L. Yeah, I'm a business dude, but that's my success because I get fulfillment through that. That's the only thing I've ever done in my life that made me feel fulfilled. I've had the money. I've bought the cars. I've taken the trips. I've done the things. I've felt good. I've spoken on stage. I've had thousands of people clap for me. And I thought it would be the greatest thing in the world. I've also found myself going back to my hotel room that night, depressed, miserable, anxious, hating my life. Dreaming of being on that stage, going to my hotel room, not going out to the networking thing, not wanting to talk to anybody, and literally like basically crying in my room like, why do I feel this way? It's because I was doing it for all of the wrong reasons. And it wasn't until I had that epiphany about 2 years ago that everything shifted for me. And the funny thing is, I started making more money.
Yep.
Which is the moment I stopped caring about money, I started making more money.
Yep. It's that polarity, man. It's kind of like in a relationship, if, you can meet a girl and you could be like, she checks all the boxes off first impression. She's, you're just magnetized to her. And then all of a sudden she's like texting you 25 times a day. You don't respond. She's blowing you up, right? All of a sudden she's like, whoa, she's being a little like clingy here. Like we just met, that kind of messes up the polarity. You could have been like totally feeling this person off first impression, but then the subsequent days that followed, you're kind of like a little like off put, and now like it messes with the attraction there. That same thing happens with money. You can feel when someone wants your money. You can feel when someone's doing something for money, even if they say they're not.
Yeah.
Incentives,
that intuition,
energy,
always,
you can feel it. And I've had the same exact experience. It's like, it's such a catch-22 because in your early days, it's like sometimes you do have to take on clients that you don't love. And you're like, well, I need the experience. I need to, get better at the service or the product. I need the market feedback. I need the testimonial, and I could use the money. So, all right. But then you find it keeps you kind of in this lower level cycle where it's like you keep attracting this kind of client that you don't really want. And then somehow you have to kind of cross the chasm, if you will, to the other side, the promised land, if you will, where you're actually like turning away business and you're actually like not even like actively trying to close people and trying to put people in the sales process. And you're just kind of being yourself and you're actually like disqualifying people. You're actually turning people away. And all of a sudden, wait a minute. And they start throwing their money at you. There's definitely something to that as well. And I believe it's just, one of the laws of the universe, the law of polarity. There's a masculine and a feminine energy, and opposites attract. So it's like when you're more, call it like reserved, call it detached, call it stoic, call it what you want, but there definitely is that aspect when you can genuinely feel like that this person doesn't want your money. And I've gotten a lot of business from me being like, I don't think, you should work with us or whatever.
They're like, no, I want to.
Yeah, like it's almost like a skit. And like, I'm not saying that knowing or thinking or knowing that they're gonna be like, wait. Like genuinely, I'm like disqualifying them because maybe something with their mindset or some sort of, excuse or whatever that they said. And then all of a sudden they start kind of qualifying themselves as to, no, but wait, I really want to do this or whatever it may be. So I definitely think that that's an interesting parallel to draw in this whole conversation of wealth and money, as well as it all comes back to that inner work and understanding what is success for you. Like you gave an excellent answer as to, how you define it. And for me, it comes back to what I said about peace. So success for me is peace.
Yeah.
And because it's peace, and it didn't used to be peace. It used to be proving others wrong. Like you said, the chip on my shoulder.
That was me for a lot of my youth.
And then and it's a helpful fuel for a while until it isn't. And then you heal and you start getting into your late 20s and you're not a boy anymore. You're a man. Like, what does it mean to be a man? Like you start to face these aspects, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, shit, if I take away this thing that's been fueling me all this time, which is really just trauma, what's going to drive me now? And there's that fear of like, well, if I take the chip off my shoulder,
will I still be driven?
Right. I'm going to lose my edge and all that. And so there was this aspect of, I almost went through like a midlife crisis around 28 when I kind of reached a financial level where I was like, realized one day I didn't need to keep working for money. And that's like a weird thing when you've just been scarcity, like, go type thing. And went through like a 6-month period where I just didn't really work. And I just went in nature and I just journaled and I would meditate and I would microdose and I would just do these different introspective practices. And I had to redefine what success looked like for me. And that was when I got really, really clear on success is peace. And that means that going forward, I will no longer accept any business, any partnership, any opportunity, anything, any relationship, like whatever it is, that doesn't bring me more peace.
So good.
I could have someone come be like, yo, I'll pay you $100,000 for, all day, whatever. If that person isn't the right energy, then no. Because you learn over time, like the longer you've been in business also, like it may seem like, I know I shouldn't do this, but it's a lot of money. It would be worth it or whatever. And then you get that and you actually see that it costs you money in the long run.
And energy and peace and things that are unquantifiable, right? Because like we talked about earlier, just the fiat and the currency and the resource, like this is thrown around, but we aren't taking it with us. Mm-hmm. We're going to die.
Yep.
The experiences we have along the way until we die are what actually matter.
Yes.
So you're actually giving up good experience and peace and joy and fulfillment for money, which really doesn't go with you anyways. And the only thing you're actually left with is the experience of life that you had.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, let me give you the most valuable thing I have for this thing that's not actually valuable, but I think is valuable.
Yes, very well said. I'm glad you reflected that back. I was using the money example, but you're so right. That's just one little piece of it. The reason it's actually a horrible strategy is because there's a lot of other aspects of life, these other buckets that are way more valuable than that. But once again, if we've never taken the space and we're in that fight or flight, right, and we're barely able to meet our safety needs and we're just like, gotta grind.
And there is a time for that.
And there is.
Man, oh man, early on in digital marketing, I think back on deals I took and clients that definitely cost me all of my peace.
Yeah.
But my bills were paid.
Yeah.
I had a roof over my head. I learned, I grew. I bumped my head on the wall enough times to say I don't want to hit the wall with my head anymore, and I actually think it was necessary. I'm really grateful I did do that.
Yeah, it gives you that contrast like I was talking about earlier. And that's why I brought it up, like crossing the chasm, because any entrepreneur, you would be lying to sit here and tell the camera that from the get-go, your first business or your first, years in business, you weren't ever experiencing that. You never.
And I get tired of that.
Yeah.
Because I see guys do that. And I'm like, I hear you. However, you're speaking from this side. Let's call it the chasm. Yeah. Homie's on this side, trying to do what you're doing over there. And it's not getting him there. And there's this major disconnect going on.
Yeah.
However, you can teach him the wisdom to say, this is what you will find. And they can learn early on so it doesn't take as long of a learning curve to get there. Yeah. I do believe that.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is something I talk a lot about with my students, which is like this notion of, to go back to like the nervous system and trauma and everything. When you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So just basic psychology, right? We have these different needs, and, we have like our basic, safety needs, and then we have like physiological safety and shelter and stuff like that. And then we start to go up to like love and belonging, and then we go to like purpose and these different types of things. But it's very much so a pyramid. No, I'm not in the Illuminati. I'm just showing you a pyramid. It starts out with the most basic needs, right? And so you can't even worry about like purpose and meaning and stuff if like you don't know where your next meal's coming from, right? And so we see this out in society. And the way that I'm, tying this into entrepreneurship is it's very much so like that. When you start out in the beginning, I mean, unless you're blessed, but most of us are building a business because we don't have it like that. It's not like we're trust fund babies or whatever. We're trying to do this instead of a job, and there's no guaranteed money coming in. And so you don't have that safety. You don't know where your next client is coming from. And so you don't have the most basic foundational safety of shelter, food, that level of safety. It's not like you're going to I'm not referencing like you live in the hood safety. I'm referencing like food, shelter, those safety needs. And in business, we have to forego that for extended periods of time when we're building something in the beginning, or we're scaling something and doubling down or reinvesting or whatever it may be. There's different seasons, but it's very much so a journey of, in the beginning, you don't have that safety. And so because you don't have that safety, you're stuck in fight or flight all the time. And the response in fight or flight is our animal natures. It is adrenaline. It's dopamine. It's go, 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 grind. I'll sleep later. So there definitely is a time and a place for that. It's all fun and games to sit up here once you've made it and tell people, like, almost shame them or judge them to be like, oh, I can't believe people act this way, or in these states, like you should be meditating 5 hours a day and just manifest it and you don't need to work. And that's not productive advice. Having said that, there is this chasm that I keep referencing that you will eventually want to cross, where it's like, once you get yourself out of that state where your nervous system can regulate, you can, all right, I got 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, expenses, cash, liquid. I can chill out a little bit. I can breathe now. Okay. Now you can start to reevaluate how your relationship is to business, how your relationship is to your clients, how your relationship is to money.
Yeah.
And you can start to go, oh, wow, I see where I've acted out of integrity. These are my values. These are some of the decisions I've made the last 24 months because I had, $573 in my bank account at the time. And I see where I wasn't aligned. And you can start to become more of a parasympathetic entrepreneur, which is, you don't need to be working, 8, 12, 16-hour days, 7 days a week. You should take time off. You should hang out with your kids. You should have hobbies. You should exercise consistently and get sun and be in nature and etc. But seasons, right? It's all about seasons.
Yeah,
so there's nothing wrong with having those seasons. But to me, and what I like to teach and what I like to show people is possible, is pay your dues, plant the seeds, right? The Bible talks all about it. Plant your seeds. There's nothing wrong with a season like that, or even seasons sometimes. But don't stay there, because there's also this notion of we can actually become addicted to these stress chemicals. And I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza, but he's pretty big on this stuff.
Yeah,
we literally, especially when we grew up with trauma, because that's so familiar to us, and unfamiliarity is synonymous with death to the ego, we would actually prefer to experience familiar feelings, even if they're horrible, than the risk unfamiliarity. And so we will unconsciously bring ourselves into these states that are, adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine. We're stressed as hell, but it's so familiar because we grew up in it.
Yeah.
Or whatever, or we normalized it for 5 years building a startup or something.
With it.
And then that's why you see these guys where you're like, bro, why are you living like that? You got $5 million liquid in the bank after taxes. Like, chill out. Like, go spend some time with your kids. And they can't.
I know an attorney
because they're addicted.
Millions in the bank.
Yeah.
And he was a client of mine. And he would tell me, every day I wake up and I tell myself I'm a piece of shit. He would literally, like, his mindset was like,
is that a strategy for him, or he hates him? Like, he hates himself.
Well, it's he's stuck in that.
Okay.
Just like you're talking about that cycle, and keeps making him money. And he keeps making more money, and he keeps making more money. But the other fruit in the areas of his life, it's trauma. It's exactly what you're hitting on. He's stuck in trauma, but the trauma's made him so much money that he doesn't know how to get out of the trauma. And finally one day I'm just like, bro, what are you doing? He's like, what do you mean? I'm successful. I'm like, yeah, but at what cost? And it like wrecked him. Like at first he was kind of prideful and you don't know what you're talking about to me. 2 weeks later, he gives me a phone call. Dude, I think you're right. And it was just a beautiful conversation out of that. And I was like, listen, dude, like, I'm not judging you. I'm saying this out of love. Like, I care about you. And I was like, but that place you're at where you have to wake up every day and tell yourself you're a piece of shit just to go hustle hard that day to make more money, that is not how life was meant to be lived. You were caught in this, and as you say it, this state that you've put yourself in from this trauma. He's in fight or flight every day. And he's very, very wealthy. Like, top 1% of all human beings that will ever walk this earth with money in the bank, and just caught there. No peace. So it's interesting as you say that. I'm like, yeah, I'd rather be a J-Griff. I'd rather have peace in my life than this attorney who I care about a lot. If you listen to this and you know who you are, I love you, man. But
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
When you speak to I'd rather be a J-Griff, and this comes back to why the brand is so important to me. I didn't grow up with a single example that what I'm now living is possible. I was only shown the Kobe Bryants. You know, you hear from his teammates how brutal it was to be around him and how much of a blank he was, and the toxicity. You could just tell that like self-hatred and childhood trauma was driving him. I don't know how much you've kind of studied him, but I've had an obsession with studying like the 1% for a long time. And that doesn't just mean financially, just outliers. And you see it over and over and over that yes, they reach the upper echelons of wealth and status and achievement and performance, and they're inspiring beyond belief, right?
Right.
We love them in our culture, and they almost reflect divinity back to us in that aspect. But we weren't shown any examples of that, and they're an amazing present father, and they have a 31-year thriving marriage where they still are in love with each other. And, they're in excellent shape, and they take care not only of externally how they look, but internally what goes into their body. And when people meet them out on the street, and you hear private accounts of it, they're always polite and humble and give respect and treat everyone like equals. I didn't have an example of that. My only example my entire life of someone who I truly could look up to and aspire to be was Jesus Christ.
Come on.
And so going back to why The Matrix is one of my favorite movies, like I really feel like my journey has been one of, I've always tried to reach outside of myself, like this mentor, this book, this course, this tip, this teaching, and I always was let down. And then one day I learned through a combination of experience, self-reflection, and integration that God was trying to teach me all this time, like, you're the one. Like, you were supposed to go through all this, to learn this, to be that beacon for others.
Yeah.
And so much of my journey, it's frustrated me, and it's felt lonely and isolating and sad and unfair, where I'm like, well, all these other people, they have mentors. They're able to like get shown the exact, plug and play and the strategy, and they're taught this, and that never worked for me. And I really had to just like come up with my own thing, if you will. And now I understand like why my path has been like how it has in that sense. I just wanted to share that because I feel like it's so important, and it goes back to this aspect of agendas in the media and what we're shown in Disney movies and everything. I mean, really, really like analyze right now for those of you listening, like think about what you've been shown in movies, music, media, magazines, TV. Think about the archetypes you've been shown around wealth. Most of them, you wouldn't want to switch lives with them.
It's funny too, and Christianity or faith.
True. Yeah.
The archetypes we've been shown in movies and
Very
all
true.
this. Oh my God. Like it's completely distorted.
And you also never really see highly spiritual, godly men who are astronomically wealthy either, do you?
And good dads and good husbands.
Yes. So it's That's the and that I'm so passionate about.
Yeah.
And I'm so passionate about it because I almost gave up the life that I've been dreaming about since I was like 6 years old, because I thought that it would mean that I was a bad person and that God wouldn't love me and that I wasn't worthy and that I would be excommunicated. And I had to realize that that's not true. And I had to really do a lot of inner work to own that, because it's not like the world gave me permission. I had to become that. And so now I'm very passionate about showing others they can have it all, but that relationship with God is pivotal to all of it.
It's cornerstone, yeah.
And further than that, like just pursuing the fiat, just pursuing the money,
so good,
it's
man.
empty.
Yeah, and looking at the fruit that the mentors you're looking up to really have in their life, that was a theme for me, was like when I finally, because I finally got exposed in my mid-20s, maybe a little before early 20s to mid, to I started to meet guys that were really successful in business, that loved Jesus, loved God, had an amazing marriage, incredible father, great human being. And when I saw it was possible, all I needed to know was it was possible. Because when you don't see it's possible, you're on that lonely journey. And I was going for it anyways, but I didn't have any role model.
Yep.
But I finally met just a couple guys that I really felt lived that. And I didn't get a lot of their time either. Like, they were busy dudes, but they gave me a little bit of their time. I just needed that little bit, that little conversation 100%. That I bought them lunch. And then it was like, wow, God, like I can be highly successful.
Yep.
And I can be the father I never had. And I can be a great husband and get married one day. And I can be a great human being. And I can have a work-life balance. I don't like the word balance either, but you know what I mean, where I prioritize both, like a rhythm kind of. Yeah. So that's cool to hear you say that. Now I know Tony's over there antsy because we're way over time. We're probably gonna have to do a 2.0, man. And we might have to do another podcast because I could just sit here and talk for like another 2 hours with you. And it's been good, dude.
Yeah, man. I when I saw we had it scheduled for an hour, I was like, oh, this will be fun. Usually it's like takes an hour to really even get into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm used to 2 hours, 2.5. So yeah, I'd love to come back. This was an amazing conversation. And I think even though it was, I don't know how long, an hour-ish, I think we're
over an hour and a half.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, we definitely touched on, a nice myriad of topics.
Yeah.
And hopefully, gave you guys in the audience more than enough to think about and chew on, and maybe a little bit of a push to, sit with yourself. And, the world's only becoming faster. It's only becoming crazier. And I don't say that in a scarcity sense. I just mean go. There's only going to be more dopamine. There's only going to be more distractions. There's only going to be more things pulling on our animal brain. There's never been a more important time to practice self-reflection, to practice being, not always doing. Everything I've created in my life, whether you want to talk about my partner, my amazing partner in our relationship, whether you want to talk about the team I have around me, whether you want to talk about my amazing students that I thank God every day for, who I get to serve, whether you want to talk about my health, our wealth, businesses, it has all come from my practice of silencing my mind and being. And in that state, that is when divinity communicates with us.
Come on.
Literally. The mastermind that I now have, that was like the turning point, the business that I've had out of all of them that really hit. Even the name of it came through in a meditation, and I didn't even know what it meant, but I just got out of the meditation, got out of the way, and started building it, and it was launched a few weeks later. I just wanted to share that with the audience because it's like, it's all fun and games to sit up here and say that stuff, but like, we really mean this.
Yeah. No, and he wouldn't be on here, investing your time out of today to be here today if you didn't, and that's kind of the mission that you're on, and I love that, man. How can people connect with you?
So, few different ways. Our main social medias that we're on is YouTube. You can find us, once again, if you just search the Conscious Wealth Podcast. You can also search official J-Griff, and you should see me pop up. We put out a lot of content. If you're into the long form, like if you really want to understand my mindset, my teaching, we put a lot of effort into free education, free content, free resources. Check out our YouTube. If you're more of a short form guy, or you want to happen to have a little chat in the DMs or whatever, I'm also on Instagram. You can connect with me at official_J-Griff, which is JGRIFF. And then outside of that, our website, jgriff.org.
Come on, man. Definitely go connect with him, guys. And Jeremy, I love the mission that you're on, man.
Thank you,
I'm
brother.
really excited to see like what continues to happen through it, and just, stay the course of that, because I think we need more examples in the world that aren't all flash, but really stand for something. So dude, it's been an honor. It's been an honor to have you on the show today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm chewing on some things right now. So thank you, man.
Yeah, brother. This felt like therapy for us both, so
yeah,
I appreciate it, man.
Thanks for joining us for therapy today, guys. I hope you got some good food for thought out of it, and just some encouragement for you guys. One of the practices I do when I listen to podcasts or get exposed to great speakers and thought leaders that provoke things in me, I reflect on like what's like 1 to 3 things from it that like really spoke to me, and I write it down and I ask, how can I use this in my life? So that's just some encouragement for you guys. Maybe listen to it again, or just take a moment to pause right now before you go do something else, and just ask like, hey, what was the 1 to 3 things in that show that really spoke to me? What did Jeremy say that really resonated with me? Write it down. The moment you write it down, the thought becomes something that's real. And then you can figure out, okay, how can I implement this in my life? Maybe it's going inward more. And I'm a practical guy too. Like, I love esoteric, but for me, it's like, I hear that and I'm like, how can I actually carve out boundaries and space in my life to allow myself to go inward more? What does that look like? Let me pull the calendar up. What time am I allowing for myself to do that? You know what? Maybe I'm going to change my calendar, and I'm going to limit the time that people can book meetings with me, and I'm going to take a little more time to spend with myself. So just some tips for you guys, some practical stuff. I appreciate you guys joining today. And if you got value out of the podcast, we don't monetize it at all. Just share it with somebody. Share it with somebody who you feel like's life would be impacted from this show. And I love you guys. I appreciate you guys so much. You guys make this possible. As you DM me and email me all the different things that you're getting from the show, it really reminds me why I do this, why I show up, why I finance this. So hopefully it makes your life better like it has mine. Go make today great.